Good morning. We are the Juneau, I guess I'm supposed to make Martha. Here we go. We are the Juneau Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. No matter your age, no matter your strength, no matter your beliefs, no matter who you love or who you live with, congregation founders, first-time visitors, we welcome you here to this community. The mission of the Juneau Unitarian Universalist Fellowship is to be a spiritual home for all people who are engaged in a search for truth and meaning, and we're glad you are here. So this morning we are blessed to have Reverend Natalie Malter with us. We're very happy to have you, Natalie, and it's really nice. Natalie has family here, so we benefit as much as they benefit, so that's a great thing. And this is a little blurb about Reverend Natalie from the Kitsap UU. Reverend Natalie Malter is a UU minister and doctoral student in the study of religion at Harvard University. Her research focuses on 20th century American religious history and religious feminist movements in the 1970s US. She served on the editorial board of a documentary history of Unitarian Universalism, and is passionate about the ways in which history shapes our present and our future. Currently, she's an affiliated community minister at Edmonds Unitarian Universalist congregation in Washington. Previously, she worked as the UU chaplain in the Office of Religious and Spiritual Life at Wesley College, where she mentored college students and supported young adult faith formation. So welcome, Reverend Natalie.
Wow. Applause. It's really exciting. Wow. Good morning, everyone. It's really lovely to see all of you here today. Thank you so much, Martha, for that introduction. As Martha said, my name is Reverend Natalie Malter, and it's a joy to be here to join you again at the Juneau Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, just a little bit north of my current home in Seattle, Washington. Thank you so much for being so warm and so welcoming to me here this morning. And thank you to my family for being willing to be dragged out to church on this beautiful sunny day, which, I mean, it's kind of we're talking about miracles today. It's kind of a miracle that anyone is willing to be inside right now. So I see your sacrifices and I appreciate them.
Eagle Crest isn't open yet.
Sure. If there was skiing happening today, it would be a different story. But I still really appreciate you all being here. And our opening words this morning come from a colleague, the Reverend Joan Javier Duval, who writes, "You are beloved and welcome here. Whether tears have fallen from your eyes this past week or gleeful laughter has spilled out of your smiling mouth, you are beloved and welcome here. Whether you are feeling brave or brokenhearted, defiant or defeated, fearsome or fearful, you are beloved and welcome here. Whether you have untold stories buried deep inside or stories that have been forced beyond the edges of comfort, you are beloved and welcome here. Whether you have made promises, broken promises, or are renewing promises, you are beloved and welcome here. Whatever is on your heart, however it is with your soul in this moment, you are beloved and welcome here. In this space of welcome and acceptance, commitment and recommitment, of covenant and connection, let us join in worship together. As we begin our time together this morning, we'll start by lighting our flaming chalice, which is a symbol of the Unitarian Universalist faith. Now, Unitarian Universalists tend to have a lot of different interpretations about what they do and why they do it and what it means. But for some people, they think the lighting of the chalice and the symbolic flame represents the light of reason. Others think it's the warmth of community or the flame of hope. I like to think that it's all three of those things. And our chalice lighting words this morning come from the Reverend Amy Brooks, who writes, "Even as the days are shorter and our wicks burn lower and our will to endure flickers, we light this chalice to kindle a flame of warmth as a reminder of the connection that draws us in to a community that opens us up, in gratitude for the breath in our lungs and the love in our hearts, for the gift of this day alive. Okay, so this is the time in our gathering together when we're going to take a minute to sing. Some of you who are maybe new here didn't know that this was going to happen, but I believe in all of us. We're going to be singing, it's in the gray hymnal, which is on your chair, number 188, called Come, Come, Whoever You Are. I know that some of you all are familiar with this already, so I'm going to invite you to sing out specifically loudly, please. It's actually adapted from a poem that was originally by the Sufi mystic Rumi. Oh, do we have a little? Oh, right. Okay, great. A couple little Zoom glitches there. And so we're all going to sing it through. Let's sing it through once together. And here, I think I can grab it. And, you know, it can be sung as a round. And if you would like to stand, you can, but there's no pressure to do so. You know, whatever feels comfortable in your body this morning, let's try to sing it out loud together. And if we do well, this is not meant to be a threat, but if we do well, we might sing it as a round. So let's see how this goes. Okay. Come, whoever you are, wonder, worshiper, lover of breathing, there's no care of despair. Come, yet again, come. Great, let's do it again all the way through. Come, whoever you are, wonder, worshiper, lover of believing, ours is no care of despair. Come, yet again, come. So I hate to break it to you, but you're doing a really good job. So, Kim, I'm going to invite you to kind of help guide people on this side. So let's split kind of right here. Yes, perfect. So this group will be with me doing the second round. Great. Are you comfortable kicking it off? Yeah. Okay, perfect. Kim, why don't you go for it? Come, come, whoever you are. Come, come, whoever you are. Wonder, worship, lover of believing, there's no care of despair. Come, yet again, come. Come, whoever you are, wanting to worship, not believing, there's no care of despair. Come, yet again, come. Beautiful. Thanks, everyone. Wow. Sounds like a group of professionals. All right. So now is the time in our gathering together when I'm going to invite everyone to kind of move into a little bit more of a meditative space. So I invite you to take a moment to just kind of check in with your body, see how you're feeling this morning. If you're like me and you to wiggle it out a little bit or stretch, just kind of adjust yourself as needed so you're comfortable, how you're sitting in your chair. And I invite you to really feel your feet touching the ground and rooting you into the earth below. And start to really notice the rise and the fall of your chest as you breathe in deeply and breathe out. And as you keep breathing, maybe you want to close your eyes or soften your gaze and lower your eyes to the floor in order to really be present to your breath and to appreciate the fullness of the air that's filling your lungs. As we breathe in and out together, I invite you to consider the quiet power of this breath, which has sustained you since you were born, mostly without your noticing. The breath which you draw in now, like all the breaths you've drawn in before, is nothing short of a miracle. Let's sit with the beauty of that miracle in silence for a few moments together. All right, so this morning, I was hoping to talk with you about something that I've been thinking a lot about this time of year, the topic related to what I just said about our breath being a miracle, the topic of miracles. So, on an ordinary day in 1994, something truly unexpected happened in the palm tree-lined coastal town of Hollywood, Florida. Diana Dicer, a middle-aged jewelry artist, set about making a grilled cheese sandwich for lunch, as she had done countless times before. However, this time, the result was undeniably different. After taking just one bite out of her sandwich and setting it down on the plate in front of her, Dicer saw a startling image staring back at her, no less than the Virgin Mary. Shocked by this Marian apparition in a slice of burnt store-bought white bread, Dicer immediately stopped eating her lunch and decided to place her new sandwich icon in a protective glass frame for safekeeping. Now, this odd experience would have ended there, known only to Dicer and a small handful of family and friends, had she not made another and perhaps more curious decision a decade later. 10 years after she first saw Mary in her grilled cheese sandwich, in 2004, Dicer decided to put the sandwich up for sale on the popular online auction site, eBay. According to Dicer, she thought it was time to share her miraculous apparition with the world. It seems safe to say that money from the sale was probably also of interest to her. Now, okay, if you're reasonably thinking at this point, who on earth would pay money for a decade-old sandwich with a bite taken out of it? The answer, it turns out, is actually a lot of people. After a heated bidding war online, the newly famed grilled cheese was sold to a Las Vegas casino for $28,000. Can you imagine? Does anyone remember this story? Yeah, okay, I see a couple nods. So news media quickly picked up on this wild story, and it became a brief but very memorable pop cultural sensation. It was featured in newspapers and magazines around the country, and suddenly, shockingly, so many people around the country started to claim that they were seeing images in their morning breakfast toast. It was on TV. It was featured in all kinds of TV shows like the popular show Glee at the time. And coming of age, as I did in Portland, Oregon, a town which is pretty renowned for its irreverent counterculture, I distinctly remember a year in the mid-aughts when it seemed like every locally owned boutique would carry special novelty toasters that promised to create a perfect rendering of the profile of the Virgin Mary on every slice of toast. Now, some said that this apparition of Mary in Dicer's toast was a miracle. And others, it seemed, doubted this authenticity. Others argue that the greatest miracle was not the image of Mary appearing at all, but rather the fact that over the 10 years it was in this glass frame, it sprouted not one single spore of mold. Although I would hazard to guess that that has a lot less to do with the supernatural and a lot more to do with the ultra-processed and disturbingly shelf-stable nature of Kraft cheese and store-bought white bread. Whatever you thought about this sandwich, one thing was certainly clear. It launched a contemporary public discourse, however ridiculous and silly, about the nature of miracles. Now, if you're like me, you probably don't think about miracles all that often or whether they exist. I tend to be quite skeptical in this particular realm. But in the winter season, suddenly we find ourselves surrounded by all of these different miracle stories from different religious traditions. And whether or not you believe in miracles this time of year, it's kind of difficult to ignore their wider cultural significance. First, there's the Jewish celebration of Hannukah, which is going on right now. We're in the midst of it, a festival that commemorates the rededication of the Second Temple in Jerusalem in the 2nd century BCE. According to the story preserved in rabbinic commentary, the Maccabees, a group of Jews living in Judea, successfully regained control of their temple from the Seleucid Empire, a Greek state that controlled the region during the Hellenistic period. The story goes that the Maccabees purified their temple after regaining control and kept sacred candles burning for 8 continuous days, despite having only enough oil for 1 day of light. The miracle of the oil is celebrated by Jews around the world today and is being celebrated right now by the community members who share this building with all of you. And they light the menorah for 8 days in commemoration of this miraculous victory. Another miracle story that is widely celebrated, that some folks celebrated earlier this week, is Christmas and the birth of Jesus, who, according to the Christian tradition, was born of the Virgin Mary in a manger in Bethlehem. And for centuries now, Christians have celebrated Christmas in commemoration of this miraculous birth story that they believe heralded the salvation of humanity. So contemporary historians of Christianity and scholars of religion have noted that Christians began celebrating Jesus' birthday on December 25th, several hundred years after his birth, or after his death, and birth. The date corresponded roughly to the celebration of the winter solstice in the Northern Hemisphere, and already corresponded with a variety of feasts and banquets that were held throughout the Roman Empire at that time of year. Winter solstice has long been celebrated in the Northern Hemisphere to mark the shortest day of the year and to celebrate the long-awaited lengthening of days. I know here, especially, the lengthening of days was pretty exciting. Did anyone here observe a solstice celebration last week? Yes? Yeah, I know I did. And it's a kind of celebration of this miraculous return of the light each year. Contemporary pagans in the Northern Hemisphere often call this winter solstice celebration Yule or Yuletide. Now, whether you believe in the return of the light as a miracle, or the oil of the Hannukah candles, or the birth of Jesus, or whether you don't believe in any of these stories, they are certainly surrounding us this time of year. Unitarian Universalists generally approach miracle stories with a healthy dose of skepticism and critique. I know that that's true for me. Anyone else around here? I'm a skeptic. After all, our 19th century Unitarian ancestors rejected the literal interpretation of miracles in the Bible and rejected the notion that Jesus was the Son of God, but actually believed instead that Jesus was simply a cool, religious teacher, an interesting dude with a lot to say, but not actually born of the Virgin Mary. Skepticism, it turns out, is a part of our Unitarian Universalist heritage and our spiritual DNA, especially when it comes to things that evoke the supernatural. And many of us today have very good reasons to be skeptical. Perhaps we've witnessed or experienced violence done in the name of organized religion and scriptural literalism. Maybe we've encountered organized religions that promote supernatural beliefs at the expense of science and the well-being of the natural world. Or maybe we've seen or been a part of religious communities that choose to ignore injustice and suffering in the present in exchange for the purported and forthcoming rewards in the afterlife. Despite my own skepticism about miracles and the supernatural, in this holiday season where they're so ubiquitous, I've been finding myself wondering, what is the deal with miracles anyway? What are they actually? Because I realized I wasn't 100% sure. And why is it that so many people around the world find them compelling? I mean, it's not just the winter holidays that we celebrate this time of year. There are miraculous birth stories in the Buddhist tradition and the Hindu tradition and the Muslim tradition, all around the world at different times of years. Why are people so drawn into the notion of the miraculous? If you're like me, despite how you commonly maybe draw on the words miracle or miraculous, it turns out maybe you too don't totally understand what they mean. So I had to do a little research on this. Many people kind of tend to employ a sort of experiential litmus test to the category of miracles, something along the lines of the "I'll know it when I see it" logic applied by the Supreme Court. So as a result of this lack of definitional clarity, it's really common to hear people toss around the term miracle to refer to instances like the supposed apparition of Mary in a grilled cheese sandwich, and to refer to the Hannukah oil that lasted for 8 days. even though these are clearly very different kinds of stories and experiences. Lucky for us, though, there are philosophers and theologians who have made their careers out of exploring this question of what is a miracle. And one such academic is Eugene Nagasawa, a philosopher of religion who teaches at the University of Oklahoma and has written extensively on the topic of miracles from the study of comparative religion. Now, in his scholarly work, Nagasawa sets about comparing miracle stories from a bunch of different religions and cultures to try to ascertain what, if anything, holds them together. He quickly rejects the notion that miracles are simply a matter of good luck. Does anyone, I feel like I hear that thrown out a lot, right? Like miracles, people often say it's a miracle if it's a matter of good luck, something positive happens. But Nagasawa says that miracles are much more unlikely than just something that a statistician would consider highly probabilistically implausible. So it has to be much more unlikely than that. It's not simply just good luck. If one chooses to accept the premise that miracles could be real, Nagasawa claims that one must accept that those occurrences are very infrequent. As he comically and thoughtfully observes, he writes, if miracles did take place everywhere all the time, then the laws of nature would be violated everywhere all the time. If that was indeed so, then nature would be so unstable that we would not be able to live normal lives. Suppose, for example, that water was frequently being turned into wine, or that dead people were being resurrected back to life. If these events took place regularly, then water supply companies and funeral directors would not be able to run their businesses very smoothly. However, Nagasawa writes, we rarely hear them complaining about these kinds of miracles taking place. Finally, after considering a lot of different definitional permutations, Nagasawa puts forward the following working definition of a miracle. He writes, a miracle is a violation of the laws of nature that is caused by a supernatural agent, which has religious significance. He further elaborates that miracles must have some positive outcomes. So a natural disaster, for example, would never be talked about as a miracle. And he argues that a miraculous event usually inspires a sense of awe and wonder in its observers, which makes a lot of sense given that the Latin word miraculum means an object that denotes wonder and amazement. So it's important to note that by defining a miracle this way, Nagasawa is not claiming that he personally believes in miracles or in the supernatural, but rather as a scholar of religion, he's suggesting this working definition for us to kind of shed light upon the significance of the category of miracles in human culture. By his definition, perhaps unsurprisingly, our Virgin Mary grilled cheese sandwich is not included in the category of the truly miraculous. It's pretty hard to justify Dicer's belief that the sandwich was a genuine sacred object with religious significance if she was so willing to sell it on eBay. Now, cognitive scientists, psychologists, and philosophers alike have long been fascinated by a question well beyond just the definition of miracles. Why, these academics wonder, are people so prone to believing in them? Could there be a scientific explanation for this tendency in human behavior? According to a 2008 study of religious belief conducted by the Pew Research Center, about 79% of Americans believe that miracles occur in the contemporary world. In recent studies, psychologists have found that humans seem to be cognitively and developmentally biased towards believing and forming and transmitting a belief in miracles. Psychologists think that this may be due to a human desire to look for explanations, to make sense of that which is mysterious, which they don't cognitively understand. Now, in addition to the frequency of belief in miracles, scientists have also studied the psychological phenomenon that occurred in Dicer's grilled cheese sandwich, which I think this is fascinating. I had no idea that this was actually, there's a psychological term for this. So the word is pareidolia. And it's a tendency to see faces and patterns in objects that aren't really there. And it occurs with relative frequency in the human population. A recent study by the MIT Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory actually found that computer algorithms are far less likely than human beings to make the mistake of detecting faces in inanimate objects, like seeing the silhouette of a person in the clouds or the image of Mary on a grilled cheese sandwich. Their preliminary research results suggest that the behavior of pareidolia was probably evolutionarily advantageous because it enabled human beings to be on high alert for potential threats from other animals who might sneak up on them unexpectedly. It turns out that that instinct or that feeling of adrenaline and heightened awareness that you have when hiking in the woods and keeping an eye out for a bear on the trail is the same overactive, but ultimately self-preservational instinct that enables us to see faces on a piece of toast. These kinds of studies demonstrate that there are likely a lot of really interesting scientific explanations for why people are so compelled by the idea of supernatural miracles. Much of the scholarly literature that we've been talking about on miracles, whether written by philosophers or psychologists or cognitive scientists, does tend to utilize a definition of miracles that relies on the supernatural. But as a skeptic myself around all things supernatural, I found myself wondering, can we have miracles without the supernatural? And what, if anything, is left of miracles when you strip them of scriptural literalism or the notion of divine intervention? Is the language of miracles still useful to us then? Now, Nagasawa does explore this question a little in his own work, the question of what is a non-supernatural miracle, if such a thing exists. And he suggests that perhaps extreme forms of human altruism are as close as we get to miracles in the contemporary world. He provides several examples of what he considers to be extreme forms of altruism, namely laying one's life down for another person. He writes that while such an act of courage does not, strictly speaking, violate the laws of nature, it does defy a lot of our scientific understanding about human beings' evolutionary interest in survival and self-preservation. Dying to protect someone else, especially someone you might not know, or even risking your life to protect someone else, whether rushing into a burning building as a firefighter or providing shelter to refugees in a war zone, these are extreme acts of altruism that prioritize someone's life over one's own. Nagasawa suggests that these non-supernatural but nonetheless deeply powerful acts often feel like real miracles to those whose lives they protect. And while extreme altruism is just that, extreme and somewhat unusual, I've been thinking too about the other smaller and more mundane kinds of non-supernatural miracles that I personally feel like I experience in the world around me. I think, it's safe to say that there is a lot in our world that stirs feelings of awe and mystery and wonder, even if we don't necessarily ascribe to the idea that it's about divine intervention in the end. Just driving into the fellowship this morning, being blown away by the beautiful sunrise over the mountains. I almost stopped multiple times to have like a little quiet moment on my drive, but I was like, I have to get to the church, to the fellowship. But those kinds of moments of awe happen so much in a place like this that is so saturated with natural beauty. And when I think of these kinds of non-supernatural, maybe everyday miracles, I'm reminded of the writing of the renowned Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh, who in his book titled aptly The Miracle of Mindfulness, wrote the following. People usually consider walking on water or thin air a miracle. But I think the real miracle is not to walk either on water or thin air, but to walk on the earth. Every day we are engaged in a miracle that we don't even recognize. A blue sky, white clouds, green leaves, the curious eyes of a child, our own two eyes. All is a miracle. Hahn here rejects the notion that miracles must defy the laws of nature and actually turns that definition on its head, insisting that nature itself, that all of our existence is threaded through with the miraculous. All, he says, is a miracle. Now, it might be hard to take Thich Nhat Hanh's admonition seriously in a world in which there is so much pain and violence and heartache and loss. In a world heavy with the weight of injustice, climate change, and war, clearly not everything is a miracle. But I think what Han means here is that both the beauty of the natural world and the power of love in human relationships are deeply meaningful and important sources of awe and wonder in our everyday lives. During his own life, Thich Nhat Hanh was no stranger to suffering and pain. In fact, as a young man, he was exiled from his homeland of Vietnam for his peace activism during the Vietnam War and was not allowed to return until 2005, nearly 40 years later. Han understood firsthand the human capacity to inflict violence and do harm. And yet, he believed deeply in his assertion that every day we are engaged in a miracle we do not even recognize. I think there's something courageous and profound about this ability to both speak out against injustice and acknowledge the violence and pain in the world, while simultaneously expressing gratitude for the small but precious moments of beauty that still exist around us. In the face of all the challenges in our world and our personal lives, I wonder if we might all benefit from this wise Buddhist teacher's urging. Maybe this reinterpretation of miracles can empower us to embrace the beauty and mystery in the world around us, to adopt a little bit more of a sense of childlike awe and wonder as we move through our days. Perhaps cultivating appreciation for and attention to these small, beautiful things that still persist despite it all is one of the most radical things we can do for ourselves and for our world in these times. Now we're going to sing not quite a closing hymn, but our next hymn together, number 131. It's Love Will Guide Us in the gray hymnal. And I believe that some of you who are regulars here will be familiar with it. So I invite you to sing out nice and loud. And if you would like to stand as you're willing and able, you can, or you can stay seated, whatever is comfortable for your body. I'm going to take a little sip of water. Okay, ready? Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot be like angels, if you cannot see for thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us. Peace has tried us. Hope inside us will lead us on the road from grief to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. I invite you to join me in the spirit of meditation and prayer. This is a prayer of hope and healing by Crystal Hogan. To the God of our understanding, the Spirit with whom we commune this morning, we ask that our minds be open, our hearts welcoming, our arms embracing. We lift up those whose lives are touched by sadness, illness, worry, or loneliness. May they find comfort, hope, and strength in this community and in the larger community. And we celebrate those whose lives are abundant with joy. May they share their strength with those in need and find warmth and love in the sharing of their spirit. May it be so. Amen. As our time together draws to a close, we will extinguish the light of the chalice, but not the fire and hope of community, those we carry with us in our hearts until we meet again. The service begins as our service ends. Go in peace, practice love. Amen. And now I want to invite you to rise in body or spirit for our closing hymn. It's number 402 in your hymnal. From you I receive, to you I give, and it's our practice to join in a circle. Okay, so if you want to stand in a circle, you're welcome to do so. Oh, and for those who are regulars, there are some hand motions. If you're a visitor, don't stress if you don't know the hand. You're holding the handle. All right. Do you want to go through it twice? Someone want to kick us off?
From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live.